In the next hour of the show, we'll have Elliott Rae in the studio. Elliott is a consultant and educator on men's mental health, star of the documentary Becoming Dad, and co-host of the Be a Boy podcast. Following the news that schools will be expected to do more to combat misogyny and teach boys about the dangers of the Manosphere, you can ask him your questions about how we have those conversations and whether the in fact, role models can do anything to solve what is a really gargantuan and complex issue.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
It is 3 minutes after 7, and as mentioned, this hour we're going to be talking to Elliott Rae, who joins me in the studio, and we'll learn a little bit more about Elliott's work in just a moment. But if you have a question about young people, young men and boys in particular, online misogyny, the manosphere, role models, all of the conversations that you and I have had for weeks and weeks, but also have been happening at government level, and new advice has been issued for schools in terms of tackling this. The number to call is 0345 6060 973. If you missed the story, it was confirmed this week that children are going to be taught how to combat misogyny and resist so-called incel culture under new guidance for schools. That was published on Tuesday. It's part of RSE, which is relationship and sex education, and big focus on helping boys find positive role models, and that's to combat the spread of sexist online content from influencers like Andrew Tate. Although if you speak to most teenagers, they will generally think of Andrew Tate as something that happened a couple of years ago and not particularly relevant anymore. But he's inspired many, many copycats and is symptomatic of a much, much broader issue. It also stresses the need to avoid stigmatising boys for being boys, as well as lessons on incel culture. And secondary schools will be required to provide young people with greater awareness of AI, deep fakes, and links between pornography and misogyny. That is a lot. That is a lot for schools to have to tackle. And inevitably, that is going to inspire conversations within the home with parents, guardians, other adults that are in a child's life. So that's why I thought I would invite Elliott in to help us to understand how we have those conversations. 0345 6060 973 if you have a question. Elliott, thank you so much for being here this evening. First of all, tell us a little bit more about what you do.
So thank you for having me first and foremost, Natasha. It's a pleasure to be on. I've been working with men and boys for a couple of decades now. Started around 2007, working with boys in Stonebridge and Harsden and Northwest London. Many of the boys that I was working with were what you would call hard to reach. I'm not sure about that term. I just think you have to approach the engagement in a different way. And I loved that work, you know, talking to boys about gang culture, about drugs, about sex, relationships, friendships, and really learned so much about the impact you can have on someone's life. The impacts that an older man, slightly older man at the time, and can come into a boy's life and just show them a different way of living. It's incredible. I've been doing similar work with men, particularly fathers, engaging them through football. So we work with some of the biggest football teams around the world to hold space for men to talk about men's mental health, to talk about gender roles, bonding with their baby and their children, work-life balance. And now I run a campaign called Parenting Out Loud. So I advise and consult with many businesses to help them to engage men and dads in conversations about inclusion. And also co-host a podcast called To Be a Boy with Jodie Brearley, where we get experts on all aspects of masculinity and boyhood and men to come and talk to us about how do we unravel what's going on right now, and how do we support our young people, our young boys and girls, with healthy conversations about what it means to be a boy and how they can see their future growing up as well.
What was it that originally inspired you to get into this particular field?
I think, so back in the day, it was the love of just conversation. I love conversation. I used music originally to engage young people, and it was some of the best work, you know. I think I fell in love with it after I started doing it, actually. And I learned so much about myself. And then working with men was really becoming a dad myself, going through my own challenges around mental health after the birth of my first daughter, struggling with PTSD after a traumatic birth experience, and just realizing that for a lot of men and boys, they don't have spaces to talk, and it can be confusing around how to show up in the workplace, in your friendships, in your communities. And so now, I dedicate my life's work to creating that conversation, but also working with organizations and working with government so we can put in place better policy and better processes to really support men and boys to be healthy and contribute to society in a good way.
And do you have a son now as well?
I've got 2 girls.
Okay.
I'm a girl dad.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was going to ask, and I guess you can tell me this from the numerous conversations that you've had with other dads. How difficult do you think it is raising a boy in today's society?
So I would say from the conversations I have, the dads tell me it's tricky. We're living in a world now where young boys under the age of 25 are the demographic of people who spend the most time alone. Now, years ago, that would have been unfathomable. It was pensioners and older people who spent the most time alone. Now, young boys under 25 spend the most time alone. 1 in 4 young boys admit to watching pornography every day. We know we have massive issues with gaming addiction. Boys are falling behind at every level of education and also in early years employment as well. And then we have the trappings of social media and the manosphere to deal with as well. So it's tough. And I think it's really about, from the father's perspective, them being as involved as possible in their child's life, which can be a challenge for some dads for a variety of different reasons. But fathers are, of course, important, as are other role models around community and faith leaders and sports leaders as well. But it is a challenge, raising kids in this generation is difficult. It's always been tricky. But I think we have an added layer of difficulty now with social media and with some of those kind of toxic online influences that are getting into our boys' heads.
There's a line in the government, what we're calling it, advice to schools or the guidance to schools, which really stood out to me because it says we need to avoid stigmatizing boys for being boys. Now, I agree that nobody should be stigmatized for an immutable characteristic. Of course I do. But it also, for me, it has echoes of every time I talk about this issue and try to acknowledge the extent of the harms that misogyny causes, I am accused of misandry. I'm accused of hating men. And does it concern you that this line is in there? Or do you think that there is a genuine problem of boys being stigmatized for who they are?
I think there is, from some sections of society, the desire to create that narrative. I think we have to engage boys in a healthy form of masculinity. Take away the titles, take away the jargon, and just talk to boys about how they can be happy, truly happy, and how they can have happy relationships and how they can help and not cause any harm to the people around them, And that's a conversation that looks at how do you see help seeking as a thing that we do, not just in crisis, but as a normal part of life. How do we maintain really strong male friendships that are based on love and vulnerability and fun and playfulness? It's around how do we find a good balance between our desire to be successful in our careers and make money, but also to spend time building relationships, and in the future, if you're going to become a parent, to focus on parenting and equal parenting. So I think young boys do feel like some sections of society label being a boy as bad. I do see that, but I feel like they are desperate for conversation, and I think the more that we can just engage boys, we talk a lot about boys. I think it's really good to talk more with boys, which is why I welcome the government guidelines, obviously with a big caveat around making sure it's facilitated properly and funded and done over a series of time so it's consistent. But I do think that boys are calling out for more conversation. I remember when I was little, when I was young, there were a few men in my life, my Uncle Ken, my Uncle Enville, who would have conversations with me just about ambition, about sex, about relationships, you know. And it might just be a half an hour conversation that they don't even remember now because they were drunk at a wedding. But to me, it was something that has stayed with me in my later years. So I do think, to answer your question, yeah, there is some of that stigma. But I think if those boys just see that we are approaching the conversation and we are on their side ultimately, then that goes away very quickly and the doors are open for a really good conversation.
Well, let's have a really good conversation now, and let's turn to Indy, who has called from Aberfoyle in Scotland. What would you like to ask?
I was just saying, I agree with a lot of what he's saying there, but I would like to just ask, I do a lot of similar work to him. I'm a socially engaged artist, and I work with boys and girls to try and explore what gender is using creativity. But I'd like to know, how would I approach boys? Because I myself are female, and I think it's a lot different coming from a woman, because I don't want them to feel like I'm attacking them. But at the same time, I'd like them to explore what it does mean to be a man in a way that they'll listen to me, rather than just think it's a woman telling them off, sort of thing.
That's a really interesting question, and one I'm interested to hear the answer to as well. What would you say, Elliott?
So I think any conversation needs to start with probably you, Indy, talking about where you're coming from. You know, I think we're just humans at the end of the day. If you can tell stories from your background, from your experience, and from what you've seen from, you know, your father, any brothers, husbands, sons, etc., like humanize yourself, I think that's a really, really good way to start. I think having the principle of this is a two-way conversation, it's not about blame. I think sometimes we can impose our ideas on young people rather than opening up a conversation. And that's a two-way, that's with trust, that's with openness, that is not telling people what is right or wrong, but inviting conversation around some topics. I think if you can, you know, bring in a man to help too, I think helps as well. Someone that can complement your style, someone that can help to tag team, I think that's always a good thing as well. But ultimately, make it fun. You know, make it fun, make it engaging, be honest. Think about the dynamics in the room. Think about good facilitation around pair work, group work, and try to have open-ended questions that encourage the boys to speak about the manosphere, speak about love, speak about sex, speak about friendships. And at the end, you want them to go away feeling like there's something to do next. I think the worst thing we can do is open up this conversation and then say, okay, thank you, see you later. We need to make sure there's some sort of follow-up, whether it's with yourself or something plugging back into their school or their community.
Indeed, was that helpful?
Yes, but I would just want to ask one little thing as an extra, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Would you say it would be better off, because right now I would basically have workshops just with boys in it. I don't include girls, because I feel like girls don't owe boys their time in a positive way. But would it be good just to have boys on their own all the time in the workshops, or would you say also include girls sometimes?
I think start with boys only. I think you want to start with a boys session. I think there is, in this space, there is the need for both. But I think the timing is very important. So you really want to set the scene with the boys. You really want to find out who's who in the group. You really want to find out where they're at the moment. And at the right time, introduce the girls into the group. But really pick your timing well. Make sure it is a safe space for the girls coming in. Make sure all the boys understand, the context that they're living in, the core messages that you're talking about, and that you want to create a space where all of them can come together and discuss. But it has to be at the right time when you'll get a sense for it. You'll know when the right time is. But I definitely think bringing the girls in later is a good thing to do as well.
Indy, thank you so much for your call. That was the voice of Elliott Rae, who is in the studio with me for this entire hour up until 8 o'clock. So if you have a question for him, 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. You're listening to Natasha Devon and the time is 7:16. How are we going to talk to boys and engage boys in this conversation about online misogyny, about toxic influences, about the manosphere, helping them to avoid falling into some of the traps which can lead them to harm others, but also harm themselves? And that's something I was going to ask you about, Elliott, is something that I'm always really keen to talk to boys about, being a mental health advocate, is I feel like a lot of the advice, in inverted commas, that is given by these misogynistic influencers to their followings is really toxic for mental health, when they're saying you have to isolate yourself. Anybody who disagrees with what I'm telling you, cut them out. You have to spend all your time in the gym. Like, fitness is important, but you have to spend your life in the gym, and you have to measure your value by how much money you have. I mean, all of these things are really corrosive for an individual's self-esteem, self-worth, mental health. So I like to talk to them about the damage this is doing you, rather than just the damage that it's doing women. I mean, I wonder, can you speak to that a little bit more?
I think it's an important angle to take, because a lot of the time, I think when we're approaching this conversation, it's from the position of what harm are you causing others, which is part of the conversation. But the other massive side of the conversation is actually what harm are you causing yourself? And to the earlier point about, boys being criticised for being boys, I think when we recognise that they are struggling too, that they have issues as well, it really helps for those barriers to break down and those boys to be way more receptive to what we're saying. So Movember did some really good research around the impact of toxic masculinity influences in the manosphere. They found that when the boys who do engage with this content, they have significantly higher feelings of worthlessness, of extreme nervousness, extreme sadness. They're more likely to exhibit harmful behaviours such as taking steroids and taking diet pills. And they have very traditional views about what it means to be a man. 62% of the boys who engage regularly in this content believe that men should solve problems on their own. And 76 saw emotional expression as a weakness. And when we think about that, that's not good for any human being. The idea that we have to go through our life and any ups and downs that we have, we need to deal with them by ourselves. That is not masculine or feminine. It is more human to accept help. It is more human to reach out to a friend, to a loved one, to a parent, to a sibling and say, this is the challenge I have going on in my life now. But those influences, as you say, really encourage boys to say, no, you have to deal with the problems by yourself. We know that we have a mental health crisis amongst young people right now. 3 out of 4 suicides are men. Sometimes we say that statistic and we're so used to it that it doesn't hit home. Suicide is the biggest killer for men under the age of 50. The biggest weapon, I guess, that a man has access to is themselves. And so I feel like we really need to talk to boys about how the manosphere is harmful to them too. There's a concept called the man box. It was popularized by a guy called Tony Porter in America. And it looks at some of these kind of ideas about what it means to be a man, the unspoken but strict ideas about what it means to be a man that define success. And these ideas are things like only suffering emotions of bravery and anger, having to be the main breadwinner in a family, dealing with problems on your own, suffering an emotional and physical pain in silence. Within the man box, we see despair, we see loneliness, we see suicidal ideation, we see isolation. So encouraging boys and men to come out of that man box and say, no, actually, I can reach for help. Actually, maybe my partner may be the main breadwinner in our family setup. Actually, I can go to therapy. Actually, I will tell my friend I love them and I want to spend some time with them. These things are not just fluffy, new age, nice to have ideas. Actually, they are critical to the longevity, to the health and well-being of boys and men and women too. So that conversation is vital and we don't have it enough. But, hopefully this conversation will open that up a little bit more and encourage more people to look at the issue from that perspective.
We'll go to a new caller, Darnell in Caterham. Darnell, what would you like to ask?
Oh, well, first of all, good afternoon, Natasha and Elliott. Elliott, thanks for your great work, as usual, and long may it continue. I'm a researcher and counsellor in a school and in a boys' school at the moment. I think sometimes, it's been mentioned before, that we should work more therapeutically with young boys and young men. And I think they yearn for it. They're missing father figures, they're missing role models. And I think just the idea of sitting down with them and talking about their emotions is very important. Building that trust with them is very important as well. So it's more of a comment to make as well. We need to push, I think, more therapeutically with young people. And I don't know if the government are thinking about that as well, rather than a sort of top-down approach to working with young boys. It should be more actually asking the young boys, what is it that you need? What are you missing? Because you'll get lots. Once you build a trust with them, you get lots of information. And I have as well in my work. And I think we really need to push that as a government to really seek from the young men what it is for them that's either going wrong or going right, what works for them. And I just think that should be our approach, really.
And it's a really interesting point that you make, Darnell, and that the government have spoken a lot about role models. It's yet to be seen whether they mean let's try and push boys and young men towards more positive online role models, or whether they mean, which I think would be more useful, people like yourself in their communities, in their schools, real life examples of men that they can actually talk to and interact with in a meaningful way.
I think so.
What I'll ask you as well, Elliott, but I'll ask Darnell first. If you have a boy who inevitably has grown up in a society which has said that it's not acceptable to show certain emotions because of his gender, how do you go about encouraging him to open up?
Well, I think, first of all, my presence is important as a male role model for them. So they see that I work with my emotions and I'm sort of vulnerable with them. So that would be my approach, is try and invite them in to have a sort of one-to-one conversation. I usually do it through playing games with them, engage in their trust, and then eventually they do come out with lots of stuff that you would never imagine. I think we're on a tipping point, really, with young people and young men especially, and it's not that difficult if you just give them the space. I think in schools especially, schools need to give young people, young boys, young ladies as well, the space to talk about things that they're going through day to day. That it's often overlooked. We're there to teach them the A, B's and C's, etc. But I think as in terms of human development, that's a big gap that's missing in schools, and I think that's the approach we should really be looking at. So I think just giving them the space therapeutically, just being curious about how they're growing up.
It's two things that schools very often don't have, isn't it? Is space and time. Darnell, thank you so much for your comments. Elliott, what would your response be to how do we encourage boys to open up?
Yeah, thanks for the call, Darnell. I would say, echo what Darnell said. I think storytelling about your own experience is the most powerful way. Sometimes we can tell people to do things. That's the easy thing to do. Yeah. But actually role modelling to them is even more powerful. So if I sit down with someone I'm mentoring, a young person, and I talk to them about some of the struggles that I've been through in my life when I was their age, or maybe a few years ago in my life, and I talk to them about how I dealt with it. Like, how did I literally deal with that thing? Like, who did I talk to? What were my feelings at night? How did I wake up? How did I carry on? What did I do? That has more impact than telling them they should open up, because I'm actually showing them I am like you. I'm a little bit older. I dress like you. I like the kind of same sort of music. You can relate to me. I've been through some of the same stuff, and this is what I did. And so I think there is so much space for just telling our own stories. And I think going back to that statistic around young boys spending the most time alone and the lack of access now to older men in the community who can just spend time with them. They may be a church leader, they may be a sports coach, they may be a father figure, an uncle, a teacher, but boys need to be around other men. As Darnell said, the presence of another man who they can look up to, who's not maybe there in their direct family chain, who doesn't necessarily have something invested there apart from a want to help them, that is so powerful. And I feel like we're just moving further and further away from that. Boys are spending more and more time isolated at home. They are gaming. They are getting their ideas from the internet. They're getting their ideas from the Manosphere rather than from the guy down the street who's just a normal bloke who works a 9 to 5, who looks after his family, who volunteers on the weekend. That is the role model we need to be reaching out to. Yeah. That is the person we need to make sure are speaking to young boys in the community.
Do you think that there's something in who is not necessarily rewarded, but who is praised by society? The reason I'm asking that question, it's reflecting on what you've said, but there's a text that's come in from Jane in Addleston on 84850, and she said, at the moment, we're seeing men behaving badly in many spheres. The news of Greg Wallace and John Turode being fired from MasterChef for sexist and racist behaviour. Trump is considering whether to release the Epstein files. Are these negative role models impacting men's behaviour, is her question.
I think so. I think we amplify the bad. The good is not sensational It's maybe not newsworthy. It's not going to get clicks. It's the average guy that coaches his son's football team. It's the guy that volunteers at the local mosque. It's the guy that goes to the school and helps all the kids get to the Christmas play. Like it's the average guy that is doing quite normal but extraordinary things to just give back and help his community. And I think there's so much space for those people to be more present. I think when it comes to role models and the conversation about role models, that there's a lack of, yes, I would say there's a lack of positive male role models in the media. I think the Trumps and the Tates, etc., do dominate that space. So I think there's a challenge for traditional media to highlight when high-profile figures do things well. High-profile men do good things. We need to publicise that more. But I think on a local community level, on a grassroots level, it's more mentorship programs. Okay. It's more schools inviting the dads in to do talks and assemblies. It's more sports clubs. It's more faith groups. It's more on a community level where we can engage men back into young boys' lives. And I think we are going away from that. And I think that is one of the biggest things that we can do to combat misogyny and the manosphere.
If you want to ask Elliott a question, 03456060973 is the number that you need. But it's 7:30 now, so it's time for the news headlines with Sinead Carroll. It's 7:33. OK, before we go back to Natalie in Bedford, just a quick one. Grant has been in touch on 84850, said, what on earth is the manosphere? Sounds like Power Rangers. Elliott, what is the manosphere?
So it does sound a bit like the Power Rangers, doesn't it? It's not the Power Rangers. So the manosphere is a group of podcasters, influencers, forums, usually led by young men, and really push quite damaging ideas. Ideas that to be a man is to be aggressive, to be dominant. It's the idea that feminism has gone too far. The idea that we should revert back to very, very traditional gender roles in the family and in relationships. And it's ultimately the idea that a man is only a real man if they are strong, they have big muscles, they are aggressive, dominant over others, and that ultimately the idea that the society is under attack, masculinity is under attack from society. The difficult thing about the manosphere is that although lots of it is harmful, young boys actually find a lot of it quite helpful, because these influencers will talk about health and fitness. They will talk about making money and investing, and working hard and work ethic. Things that we don't necessarily as people disagree with, that you would say are quite reasonable. The challenge is for a young boy who is 11, 12, 13 years old, they will not be able to differentiate between what is just normal kind of self-help, actually quite good advice, and what is very toxic ideology about women, about violence against women, about the idea of masculinity. The other issue is that the algorithm on our social media apps show lots of this content to young boys. So the NSPCC did some research and showed that for a young boy, if they go on a social media platform, around 25% of the content they're going to see and be fed is misogynistic content from the manosphere. If they engage with it, it goes up to 75%. So it's not that young boys are out looking for this content. They're just online. It gets fed to them. They engage with it. And before you know it, the majority of their feed is people telling them, go to the gym, be dominant over others, the world is against you, and I've got the solution. So it's a massive issue. I think parents, carers, and just people in general need to learn more about what it is. Andrew Tate has been the figurehead, but there is so much more than Andrew Tate. And I think we have to understand what our children are consuming and how is that impacting their behaviour and their beliefs. We know that for many young boys, they feel like feminism has gone too far. They feel like they are under attack, and they feel like their only source of help is these people online who are really out to harm them and make money from them selling courses. So it's something we have to understand. But thank you for the question and giving me the opportunity to explain it a little bit more.
And Grant, if you are interested in learning more, there's two books that I would recommend that you pick up. One is called Clown World, which is a 4-year investigation by 2 vice journalists into Andrew Tate and the world that he inhabits, which helps you understand the manosphere a little bit more. The other is Men Who Hate Women by Laura Bates. Similarly, she posed as a man and spent 4 years in the the Manosphere to really immerse herself in it and understand what is the advice being given and how does it inexorably lead not just to misogyny actually, but also to racism and homophobia. So you will understand that term a lot better, not only from Elliott's description, but from those two books as well. Now, we've managed to get Natalie in Bedford back on a better line. Natalie, what would you like to ask?
Hello, thank you so much. Hi, Elliott. So, Elliott, do you think there's a link between the rise of the Manosphere and the breakdown of family structures, particularly the issue of absent fathers? Now, I'm generalising here, but many young boys who end up committing serious crimes often lack stable leadership or a positive male role model at home. So do you believe this lack of guidance leaves them especially vulnerable to both criminal behaviour and the influence of toxic masculinity and ideologies online?
So I'm not sure that the Manosphere has contributed to family breakdown, but I would say that family breakdown and the lack of father figures at home does put young boys more at risk of accessing and being influenced by this content. The Centre for Social Justice estimates that approximately 2 million children in the UK have no meaningful contact with their father. And around 1 in 4 children do not live with their father. That's not to say the father's not involved, but doesn't live in the home. I think sometimes in this country we don't value the role of fathers. From the very beginning of a child's life, paternity leave is the worst in Europe, in the UK. It is paid at £178 for 2 weeks. Around 1 in 5 dads don't take any paternity leave at all. So from the very start of that child's life and that baby's life, we are really devaluing the impact of the father being an equal parent in the household. Fatherhood is really, really important. You know, I can talk from my own experience growing up in Wembley as a black man, a black boy. I had and still have a very strong father figure at home. And I can hands down say without him staying with me, sticking with me through when I was acting up as a teenager, there were many influences outside the home. Many friends that were doing things I shouldn't have been doing. And this was before the internet. We didn't have smartphones. Many things I could have been up to, but I knew I had a dad and a mum, a very strong father figure at home who set an example for me. Who really made me accountable.
Sorry, could I just come in there?
Sure.
And I think what you've just said, it proves my point because, young men are 3 times more likely to be arrested for violence offences and domestic and sexual violence. And, these men, there is a generation of men who have not done right by their children. And because of that, there are some children that have fallen vulnerable to violence and committed crimes. And, I understand that men do need to be supported. I 100% agree with your mission here. But there are men that I believe that should be held to account for not raising their children. I really do.
I don't disagree with you. I think society is complex. There's the good and the bad. There are some men that haven't shown up, and they should be accountable. And it's not right at all to have a child and then to leave them to figure it out by themselves without you is not on. It's not acceptable. At the same time, there are lots of men who do want to be more involved, and because of maybe traditional gender roles where they're out working, maybe because of lack of access through the court system or whatever it is, they haven't been able to be as involved as they would want to be. And so I think we need to kind of, rather than painting everyone with the same brush, I think it's about looking at everyone as individuals and saying, okay, how do we support everyone to do better? So I completely agree with your point. I think we devalue fathers in this country, and we need to make sure they are involved.
Do you think that because society, or just that simple example that you gave of paternity leave, it paints fathers very often as disposable or a sort of nice to have, an optional extra, as opposed to really quite fundamental, wherever, obviously not always possible to have a father in the home, but, wherever possible, so fundamental to a child's life. Do you think that you can internalise that as a man and sometimes think, well, they don't need me, or they'd be better off without me, your children?
I think so. I think the message that we've had is that that dads are kind of disposable. Like, it's great if they're there and if they're around, it's good, rather than seeing dads as actually a vital part of child development. The University of Leeds did some research and showed that when dads are present and contributing in a healthy way to that child's life, up until the age of 5 years old, that child has better outcomes in regards to education and also behaviour as well. Now, it's difficult because, dads might not be in a family for a variety of reasons. They may have passed away or, anything like that. And I think we can find other ways of getting men involved in young child's lives. At the same time, we have to admit the research is there. And dads being involved does help children in the early years and in the later years as well. It really helps children to find who they are, to build self-esteem, to be able to go out in the world with a really strong foundation behind them. Dads are critical at playing that role. Dads are sometimes the more playful one that can encourage that child with confidence and to find who they are and to be more assertive in the world. Dads play a key role in that part of parenting. So I think it is really important. We need to change how we look at fatherhood as you said, Natasha, not just a nice to have, but like mothers, a fundamental and critical part of the family, and keep families together and make sure they can both contribute, yes, to running the household, domestic chores, to work, but also to caregiving as well. And, my Parenting Out Loud campaign is all about how we encourage dads to be loud and proud about their caring responsibilities at work, to work flexibly, to take their full parental leave available, to have really awkward conversations with their managers and their peers about what they need to be an equal parent at home. We need to encourage dads to have those conversations so they can be the fathers they want to be in the household.
It's so pervasive. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was doing a parent talk in a school, and one of the female teachers in the school said to me, I can come to your parent talk later because my partner's babysitting the kids. And I said, is he babysitting or is he caring for his own children? But it's stuff like that, isn't it? Which is so baked in. Natalie, thank you so much for your call. Emmanuel has called from Bradford. What would you like to ask?
Hi, Natasha. Thank you for letting me call in. So, Elliott, my question to you is, and this is going off the previous calls as well as the previous conversation, how would you direct young men to the right role models, and particularly speaking with young men that grow up without fathers? Because I know that it's hard for them, and I think with a lot of them, that's probably the commonality in why they draw themselves to the manospheres, and on all the online influence in it. So how would you engage them in particular with the men that the father figures just isn't there, or is just absent, or just inactive? So how would you engage them in particular?
Hi, Emmanuel. So I think we have to look around us. Emmanuel, if you can think of 5 men in your life, they may be work colleagues, maybe in your friendship group, in your family, 5 men that you respect, who have achieved a level of success. I'm not just talking about career, I'm just talking about health and well-being and life and family and, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Those men are probably going to be delighted that you asked them to spend time with your son or a young person. It's flattering to be asked to spend time with someone. It's nice for us. Most people say yes. I have never approached someone and said, can you do me a favor? I've got this young person. Can you talk to them? They've never said no. Okay, it might be a diary issue. They can't do it straight away in the next 2 weeks, but they've never said no. And I think it's just us being a little bit brave. Just looking at the people around us, there will be people in your network, looking at those people and saying, okay, can you spend an hour with this young person? Maybe go for a walk, go for a coffee, whatever it is, kick the ball around in the park, go for a drive. Can you spend an hour every 3 months for the next year or so? And if you get 5 people on board to spend time with your son or the young person that you're thinking about, that can have a transformational impact on that boy's life, because they will just learn how that man operates in his marriage or his relationship. They will learn how that man works on his health and fitness, how he eats, how he how he talks to people in public, how he orders food, you know, how he drives, how he carries himself. And those sort of things are formative. I think we really devalue how important it is. So I think those people are around us. I think it's just about looking about, you know, who's in your network and who can you call on.
Emmanuel, thank you for your question. If you want to ask a question to Elliott, the number is 0345 6060 973. You're listening to Natasha Devon and the time is 7:46. Talking about tackling misogyny. The reason we're talking about this hour is because earlier in the week there was this guidance issued to schools, and there's going to be an expectation now on schools that they're going to be teaching young people about this. I wonder, Elliott, what did you make of that guidance?
So I support the guidance in principle. I think we should be talking to young people about masculinity. There's amazing charities like Beyond Equality that have been doing this, and they have massive reach and massive impact. Big caveat to the guidance, though. I think we are asking already overwhelmed teachers to deliver quite challenging and nuanced and sensitive discussions and conversations. We need to make sure we give teachers the space and time and training, which I am concerned about, because the guidance at the moment is around essentially shoehorning it into existing RSHE lessons.
Right.
So I think for me, that's the biggest thing. I think it's important, if we're going to have these conversations, to make sure male teachers are involved as well. But across secondary school, only 35% of secondary school teachers are male. So how does that work? And also, I think the biggest thing here is there is the possibility, which is kind of natural, that the teachers will bring, and this is not teacher bashing, I love teachers, they do the most important work, but teachers could bring their own ideology and ideas into this conversation, which is natural. However, those teachers may not understand the issues, they may not have what we would think are progressive, healthy views, and they could end up blaming young people, demonizing masculinity, and pushing the boys away, and actually recruiting more boys to the manosphere. So in principle, I agree with the guidance. I think it's so nuanced and so difficult to deliver. I really want the government to think about funding, time, and bringing in professionals who have been doing this work to be able to train the teachers to be able to get it right.
It kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier, that the danger is that the teachers will just tell them what the guidance is, as opposed to engaging them in conversation. And then even if it's done from a really good progressive place, those boys are going to feel like they're being lectured, aren't they?
It's so difficult when someone says something that you don't agree with. Like our natural state is to respond emotionally and shut down that conversation. You know, for a living, I facilitate conversations, and I can feel myself sometimes, my head gets hot, right?
Yeah.
Like when someone's saying something, but I've learned over time, over years, how to channel that energy and how to keep a healthy conversation with something that is so sensitive and so nuanced. It's a really tricky skill, and it takes a particular type of experience and person to deliver that.
Yeah.
And asking teachers who are already stretched to do that is a massive task. So we need to be really careful about introducing this into schools and making sure it's done in the right way.
It's emotive, and it's also, you know, everybody has a gender, even if that gender is non-binary. Everybody knows what it feels like to have a gender. So it's one of those things, like, we all kind of think we're an expert in this, and yet you need, like you say, to have a lot of experience and a very particular approach in order to get this conversation right. Let's take some more calls. John has called from Waltham Forest. What would you like to say?
Yeah, well, first of all, to Elliott, well done for doing what you're doing. It's really important that you're out there helping people. I look at this from a slightly different angle. I actually think the root of this problem goes way back to the beginning, and it's really to do with marriage. It's whether or not, as a man, you know and understand the importance of marrying your partner, turning her into a wife and you into a husband. And I find that once you go through that ritual, the children tend to be far more confident about their lives. And I think that it's all very well, and it's important to speak to young boys for sure, but my attitude towards women really grew out of my family, from my dad, being married to my mum, and my teachers, mostly were female. I didn't need all of this intervention, growing up. And I just think that we need to go back sometimes to the beginning. If you're going to have children, try and get married. It's really quite important.
So, John, is what you're saying that we should be teaching boys that the reason that they should respect women is because they may want to marry one day?
No, not at all. I'm saying that the whole process of the reason why we have this crisis today is because we've promoted at times, this very lax attitude towards sexual relationships, having children out of wedlock. Here we are with all these young boys and young men who have no sense of what it is to be a man. And from a generation older than that, who grew up in households that were with a father that married their mothers, put a ring on her finger, went through the process of courting, it made a major difference.
But misogyny still existed then? Domestic violence still existed back then?
It certainly did. But my point is that I remember actually, there were the children who didn't have fathers in their homes. You could always see it in their behaviour. And this is going back more than 40 years. You could see it in their behaviour. They always seemed to be a bit lost. Whereas the boys who had fathers in their lives, very different. Very, very different.
Okay, John, I mean, I'm going to throw to you, Elliott. There are so many things I could say, but who cares what I have to say? Elliott, what's your response to that?
So I don't dispute the power of fathers. I don't dispute that we need to role model healthy relationships. I think just focusing on marriage may be a bit short-sighted. I think as long as that child sees a healthy relationship between parents is the main thing. Sometimes relationships don't work for a variety of different reasons. But if there's a good co-parenting relationship and that dad plays an active part in that child's life along with the mother, of course that's going to help the child. So I'm a bit uncomfortable with looking at just purely like marriage as the solution. But at the same time, I don't dispute healthy relationships. Relationships in this day and age can look quite different. There's blended families, there are step parents, there are so many different families, same-sex families, etc. I think what we need to role model is respect, is autonomy, and is healthy relationships. I think that is the most important thing here.
Well said. Thank you, John. Now, I've got some quick fire questions for you, Elliott, before we let you go. What film or TV show do you think shows healthy masculinity?
That's a good question. The fact that nothing comes to mind is a problem.
It speaks volumes. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, I've got one. Family Reunion.
Okay.
And it's on Netflix. My daughter loves it. A black family in America. The dad is an ex-NBA player. And he's just a great man. Doesn't take himself too seriously, is always present, always there for the difficult conversations, has a great relationship, and it's fantastic. And I'm really glad that my daughter loves the programme and watches it. It's really good.
You just made me think of Uncle Phil in Fresh Prince as well.
A little bit.
Similar vibes.
Yes, similar vibes to Uncle Phil.
When was the moment you felt you became a man?
If I'm honest with that, probably in my late 20s. I think probably when I met my now wife, and I had to step up because she wanted a consistent presence in her life. And for me, I had to, if I wanted to be with her, I had to be that. And it really, I think, held me accountable. And her too. We hold each other accountable. And I think that's probably when I could say, yeah, I really became responsible for my actions, I would say.
And that's, I mean, going back to our call from John and what you were saying about healthy relationships, that's what a healthy relationship is, isn't it? When you help to bring out the best in each other and help each other to grow and become the best version of yourselves. And that's very much a two-way process. What's a piece of advice that you would give to your younger self?
It's going to be okay.
Like it.
It's going to be okay. Keep working. Be brave. Be yourself as fast as you can. Find yourself and don't worry about what everyone else is doing. You're going to find your path. It might take you a bit longer than other people, but it's going to be okay. Keep plugging away.
I love that. Elliott, I really hope that you have enjoyed your time in the studio with us. We will have you back, most definitely. I think it's so valuable, the work that you're doing and everything that you have to say. And I hope that everybody who was listening to that, you now have a better understanding of what it is that we're up against, but some of the solutions that are out there, and hopefully that we're going to be kind of baking into school cultures and communities as well. If people want to find out more about your work, Elliott, where can they find you?
Sure, it's simple. ElliottRae.com. So ELLIOTTRAE.com. I'm very active on LinkedIn, so you can add me on there, Elliott Rae. So thank you for having me, Natasha. It's been a pleasure. I've loved that, and I've loved all the callers, so thank you so much.